Hello, everybody. Mr. Brown here with the Choose Well Program podcast. Today, we're talking about connecting with students, how to connect with them. We're going to use some practical ideas and examples because we have an expert here sitting next to me.
Only 3 years. But
Only 3 years.
If you're calling me an expert, I'll take it, I guess.
Well, we're going to give some practical ideas of connecting with students from the classroom and my experience of working with students in all types of areas, whether it be after-school program, day camps, and even in public schools, how to connect with students. Welcome to the show. Again, not Dr. Yet, I'm sorry.
Not Dr. Yet.
Brad Davis.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Or Mr. Davis. We call him Mr. Davis because he's a teacher, so Mr. Davis.
You know what's funny is kids call me by my first name a ton too.
They call you Mr. Brad or just Brad?
Well, I used to teach PE, and so they would call me Mr. Brad.
Okay.
And so I just let it slide sometimes. I'm not so critical about what they call me.
Well, we'll talk about this another time, but that's why I legally changed my first name to Mr. because I was called Mr. Brown for so many years, and it just stuck, even though I wasn't in the classroom. And because when I grew up, you always had to put a handle on that name. Like, you could not call an adult by their first name. That was like death. And I get some of that, but I think making connection with them is more important than your first name and last name, but also connecting with respect. So let's jump in this right away. Some practical things to connect with students. Top of your head, what's one way to connect with students?
As far as a teacher's perspective, I think my go-to is a strategy that I call class meetings. I don't know if I've told you about that, but what it is just kind of an inclusive meeting where I do it at the start of the day. I think that's the best strategy. You get all the kids in this just big circle in the middle of class, and you propose a topic. I mean, it can be anything as far as like, what's your favorite color, or where do you want to travel on vacation? But what it does is it builds this culture of communication in your classroom. I spend probably 10 to 15 minutes a day just on talking to kids. And what that allows me to do is it gives me the opportunity, say maybe 20 days into school, maybe something heavy happens. Maybe there's bullying going on, or maybe, a kid's going through something tragic. I now have this vehicle that we can all sit in this safe space and just talk.
So every day you start 15 minutes of your day with having a classroom meeting?
Every day. Every day.
How did the kids respond to that at first?
Some people think kids would not be open, but kids love to talk. Like you and me. Like kids just love
They love to talk. Yeah. They love to be heard.
True. Yeah.
They love to be heard. And what I found when I do these kind of meetings, or when we set the ground rules up right, sometimes they love to listen to other kids' stories too.
Yes.
Some you can see the body language. Sometimes they're not fidgeting. They're not looking out. They're actually tentatively listening to some other kid's story.
Yeah. When I first started doing this in second grade, there was multiple experiences where a teacher would open my side door and they would just turn around and walk away. And later in the day, they're like, "Hey, where were you this morning?" I was like, "Oh, we were just sitting down talking. They couldn't hear us. They couldn't see us.
Had a fireside chat."
Yeah, man. The kids are being so respectful because if you set that foundation of rules, like you said, they're there listening. They're there understanding. And even if you think they're not listening, they're at least catching the culture and the vibe, and they're feeling that in the classroom.
I like to call it, we did this in my Sunday school class, we called it a connection question. Every week we did a connection question. And sometimes we sat in a circle, but sometimes it was a bigger group. But I sat down on the floor with them and we did a connection question. And the students got to answer, and people, and they just connected. And sometimes when one kid answered, the other kids can relate, and they kind of raise their hand and say something, "Oh, I did that too," and it was a great time to connect. So tell me about a time where you did this, where you saw something that you didn't expect.
Man, one of the I share this story every time. Beginning of the school year this year, I was teaching fourth grade, and the first day of class, I always ask the same question. How was your summer? Everybody wants to talk about their summer. Every kid, even us adults, teachers, we want to share our vacations and stuff.
I just slept and napped. I just stayed out of the heat, right?
Yeah. And so as we're going around the circle, it comes to a girl, and she wants to pass. And I was very surprised by that, but part of our class rule is that you can pass, but it needs to come back to you and you have to share later. So after everyone shares, the talking stick comes back to her, and she opens up that her grandma passed away 2 days before school started. And before I could even open my mouth, I was trying to analyze what to say. Another student raised his hand, and he shared that his grandpa passed away over summer. And then after that, I was able to share that actually my grandma passed away this summer. And so here this little girl that did not want to share, she was feeling isolated, alone, scared, now is accepted. immediately.
So that, as you saw her body language, did you see it change? Did you see her demeanor change at all after that?
She was completely shut down before, as it came to her, she was looking down past the stick. I could tell almost immediately something was wrong. As she was able to release that and share, she had a huge smile on her face. She was crying too, but she was smiling. And I'm like, now she's bought in. Now, day one, I know I've connected with this student.
And I think you connected with the other students too. And I think doing that kind of classroom meeting, whatever you want to call it, even though it may be, especially older kids, it may be awkward at first, but I think you connect with the students. They connect with you, especially if you share your stories or share some things about yourself too. But also they connect with each other. Did you see any of that going on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, after that, you could tell students were able to come up to her and vocalize how they felt about, these kids have all probably had a grandparent pass away or somebody close to them or an uncle or an aunt. They all could at least come to talk to her after that. It's just also with those meetings, something I don't know if I've told you is you have students in there that may come from traumatic backgrounds or hard lives where they don't get to see a ton of human emotion. So say a kid that, doesn't get to see these stories, doesn't get to, that exposure, they have to sit in my class for 185 days and see a variety of emotions from a variety of people. I'm not a math whiz, I only teach fourth grade, but you multiply 30 kids by 180 days sharing stories. That is so much more exposure to social emotional learning than those kids would get if you didn't do that.
And it actually helps kids be grateful for their situation when they hear bad stories or, just understanding where kids come from. And I think, there's a big push on bullying. It's always there, right? Bullying. But I think what you're creating in your classroom is helping kids have empathy. It's harder to bully a kid that I know his story. It's harder to bully a kid that I know his grandma died and he's struggling with that. You know what I mean? It just makes a different environment.
Yeah. And what's really nice about having that environment is, speaking of bullying, I have throughout the year have kids bring questions to my circle. Not every day is it this impactful, mountain we're climbing.
So they bring the question.
Yeah, sometimes. So
okay.
I leave it when we'll start. I'll hold the talking stick and I'm like, hey, does anybody have anything they want to talk about? And that's how I start. And some days, they ask the same question 120 times, how's your weekend? What are you doing this weekend? And I won't let those go. But, 4 or 5 kids later, maybe they come up with something. When was the last time you were scared? And you're like, ooh.
You had a kid come up with that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what, did everybody share?
I can't remember specifics, but what I listen for is perspective. So what I mean by that is one time I asked, or I don't know if I asked, your ideal vacation. So, Mr. Brown, what would your ideal vacation be?
Whatever my wife wants to do. I mean, because she wants to travel around the world. She wants to go to places. So as long as I can be with her and I get some downtime, I get to play basketball maybe, you get to sit down and you just chill. If she's happy, I'm happy.
Okay, so my thought process would be you're caring. You care about your wife. You care about what she thinks. So now think about your kids. Your kids start sharing, and a student says, I want to go to the Great Barrier Reef. I want to go scuba diving, That kid's got perspective. He has goals. He has visions in his life.
Right.
You come to another student, he goes, I want to go to Red Bluff. How do you have kids that have these grand ideas of traveling the world?
And other kid wants to go 30 minutes down the road.
Yeah, 30 minutes down the road. And so to me, I take that information, I store that, and I say, okay, what's going on with this kid? Why is he so short-sighted? Why does he only want to go there? Maybe his mom lives there and he hasn't seen her.
Wow, yeah.
So having that information 185 days, if you don't use it as just a tool to get by and you use it as a tool to understand your students, you'll have a wealth of knowledge and perspective that a lot of people don't get.
Wow. So I've known you for a little bit now, and we have a lot in common, I think, in how we approach things. How do you feel? Do you share things in the circle as well? And how do you think kids respond to that?
100% I share. Like I said, not every day it's this impactful thing, but demonstrating that I'm a person before I'm a teacher is huge. So I haven't shared, I don't think on your podcast, I grew up really rough in the Bay Area. My kids know that story and my students know that story. And the reason is because I want to be a beacon of light to show them that you can overcome hard things.
I had a teacher one time, we were doing this with some professional development. I work with the school every month. I was on campus. And one of the teachers told me that another one of her teachers had season tickets to the Giants, San Francisco Giants baseball team. And she encouraged her fellow teacher to share that with her kids. And her response was, it's none of their business. And I think she missed it. Like, that is something simple that kids who like the Giants would be like, wow, you get to go and give them a vision for something different. And my teacher gets to go. And if there's a game, they might be watching the game. She might be there. That's a connection point that I think was wasted. And it's not, she's right, it's none of their business. But you know what? She's a person who does fun things, and they need to see that as well.
Yeah, one of the most enjoyable things that I love is bringing things that I love outside of the classroom into the classroom. It really helps me connect with students. I mean, we can even think of it kind of selfishly, like I love coffee. You know how many times my kids have brought me coffee this year because I've told them about me loving coffee or bringing me gift cards.
I got some chicken wings that way once.
You know, some days, you'll believe it or not, if I'm having a bad day and a kid brings me a coffee, man, that'll light you up right there.
Yeah, I think it's important to share those things. And I remember sharing yourself because, like you said before, they need to see you as a person. And I remember I spoke at a school here locally. And after I got done speaking, the lady that brought me in, I think she was a counselor, she said, she gave me some feedback. And I appreciate feedback. And she said to me, I think you spent too much time talking about your family. And I said, okay, I'll take that under advisement. I'll think about that. Well, a couple weeks later, I was out of town speaking at the school, and this is an opportunity. I spoke to the students first, then after school, spoke to all the educators. And so I asked them for feedback. And, hey, I want honest feedback. You can write it down, or we can talk about it out loud, whatever. I just want some honest feedback. Not just like, you did a good job. I want some honest feedback. And I told, hey, even I was at school recently, someone told me I spent too much time talking about my family. And I took that as an advisement. And then the teacher raised his hand. He said, you know what? I thought the same thing too at first, until I realized they need to see you as a person. And not only that, they need to see family units. They need to see someone they can connect with. And they did. And I thought, you know what? I did change a little bit, but not too much. In that same school, when we did a family night, a couple months later, we did a family night, invited all the families together. The kids were more excited about meeting my kids than they were me. They walked by me and they ran to my kids because they felt like they knew my kids from my presentation. I think it's so important to connect with students by sharing who you are. So you mentioned coffee. Tell me something else you shared with kids that really kind of just blew their minds. Like, wow, I can't believe that.
I don't know if I've told you this. I also own my custom furniture business. So
you can give a plug on the show. What's the name?
I don't need extra business, but if you want to look at my Instagram, it's Davis_hand_built. And so, I'm so busy with teaching and school, and I have 3 kids. I do it more as an outlet and love of it and creating. And so I bring that into the classroom. And every year my students have built custom charcuterie boards as Christmas gifts.
And you said that so fast. Custom what boards?
I have to say it fast because I don't want to mess it up. Charcuterie boards, like serving boards.
I'm not swearing. Charcuterie boards?
Charcuterie.
I've never heard that word before.
Man, it's popular right now. It's just like serving boards for like meat and cheese. It's a French word.
Okay. So it's like a cutting board?
Kind of.
But you can't really cut on.
You can cut on any like hardwood, but it's easier to make it a serving board so they don't mar it up the surface. So it just holds stuff. The kids get to put handles on it, so they got to screw in handles. They sand it down. They got to clean it, oil it. So they get this whole experience. I can't tell you how many kids have never worked with their hands, never used a drill. They get this experience, and I talk about it all the time. I love that aspect of creating and building. And so it's something that I really enjoy, and then getting to see them work on this project that honestly takes them like 2-3 weeks sometimes.
And they stick with it.
They have to. They don't get a choice. They're out there sanding by hand, getting all dirty. But seeing them get enjoyment out of creating something is just so rewarding. And then, like I said, that's Christmas time, so we've been teaching for a couple months. And they know that I love it. I have a custom desk in my classroom, so they see that.
You built it. You built the desk. And so you tell them, when you tell them you built this desk, what's their response? And
they light up. The parents light up too. Parents come in for conferences, and that's where they sit, and they're like, "Oh my God, I love this." I'm like, "Yeah."
You kind of just send a smile like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah,
that's cool. I think that is a great way to connect with students, sharing your life, and we didn't even get to modeling yet. That's our next point. But you basically said having classroom meetings, which leads to you sharing your life, which can be a second point. Sharing your life, sharing your story with students, connecting with them by sharing who you are. You don't have to share everything. You went through divorce. You had a fight with your husband last night. No, not that kind of stuff. But there's things in life that you can share with them within reason to help them see you as a person. And one of my favorites is this. If you're having a bad day, and something happened in your family, I think it's okay to share with the kids, look, I'm just having a bad day today. You don't have to share exactly what it is, but that helps them see you as a human as well. Because how many of them have walked in a classroom and just had a bad day?
I think I take this perspective with students. I look at them as like my employees. Like, I'm a boss. Bosses are allowed to be vulnerable, and the best bosses I've ever had in my life, came to me and connected. And, sometimes they had bad days. Well, if I share that with my employees or my students, who do you think is going to pick me up? They are.
Yeah.
They have perspective on things. They're little humans. They have great ideas and they have great ways. Some days when, I was in my master's program this last year, and I was like, man, I'm tired today. I was up till 2 a.m. writing papers. They were the ones that gave me extra hugs, or they were the ones that were like, I'm going to pay attention better today for Mr. Davis, or, I'm going to go out of my way to make sure he's feeling okay.
And they saw you do extra, like you're going through, they knew you were taking your master's course. They knew you were going further in education, but yet still showing up to school every day.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah, and I use that kind of as a talking point. Oh, you look tired today. Oh, Mr. Brown, you're tired. Guess what I did last night? Well, I was up till 11 o'clock writing a paper.
So you talked about the idea of classroom meetings. We talked about that leads to just sharing who you are. And I think the next point is modeling. That kind of came out too. Like, you're modeling for them behaviors or how to live. And I put it this way. I'm willing to be a imperfect, positive role model in students' lives. Like, I'm imperfect, but I'm willing to be a role model. So what do you say about modeling behavior as a teacher in the classroom?
I think modeling, as anybody, should be important. I want to carry myself well. I want to walk around the campus and carry myself well because I want other people to carry themselves well. I don't do it for selfish reasons, and I don't, put myself out there and try to get kudos. I want other people to be the best version of themselves. So for my students, I tell them it's okay to make mistakes. I make mistakes. I don't know how many times, I'd be reading something and I'd fumble over the words and, oh, Mr. Davis, you did that. And I'm like, yes, I did. I'm not perfect.
I made a mistake.
And I have witnessed a lot of teachers, I've spent hundreds of hours observing teachers where they cover those up or they brush by them. And I use those as learning opportunities.
Yes.
And, I'll make a mistake, and this is my go-to. A teacher should always do this. But if I mess something up, I'm always like, oh, good. I was testing you. I'm glad you caught that. yeah, I did mess that up.
Yeah, I can't do that. I misspell stuff all the time. They catch it all the time.
Oh, that's my worst.
Yeah,
spelling worst. I'm not going to lie. But,
and I think modeling helps remind you that they're always watching you. Kids are always watching. They watch you when you don't know they're watching, and when you don't want them watching, and they'll say things and do things like, what, they saw that. So again, not that we're trying to be perfect, but we want to be conscious of the fact that these kids are learning from us. And I often joke with students, older students, especially when I do training for like counselors, stuff like that. And I will say this, listen to me. Do you know that some kid is looking at you going, I want to be like him when I grow up? Like, I want to be just like my older brother. And so I talk to the junior high students or high school students. Somebody's looking at you going, I want to be just like them. Is that a scary thought? And they're like, yeah. But even as teachers, understanding, and adults for that matter, that somebody's looking at us going, I want to be just like him. Yep. I want to be just like her.
You gotta practice what you preach. So in the classroom, if I'm telling kids, in stressful times, taking a breath, I got to do that. You're perfect opportunity standing in front of 25, 30 students. And if you're flustered, I always tell my students, put a heart on their belly and take a breath. I've done that so many times, and it's vulnerable and it's kind of scary in the beginning, but to see that reciprocated by students,
right,
it's powerful.
Right. And my kids reminded me recently of a positive way they were watching me. One of the things I try to teach my kids all the time is consider others. Me and Sophia, we made a podcast recently. You can check out other podcasts called Conversation with the Browns. And me and her sat in these chairs back here, and we just talked about, we were just practicing. Actually, we were practicing the look of the studio back here. We're just practicing what it looks like. She was helping me out, and we actually recorded a real podcast. Since I was testing out some mics to see how it works. And we got to talking about life. But one of the things that I said, Sophie, what do I always teach you guys? She says, consider others. Right? And I say all the time. And so we had a long conversation about this. Well, not too long ago, we were at Costco. We pulled up in Costco, and my kids said to me eventually, we knew you would. Like this, right? And so what had happened was we got out the truck. I always back in. My daughter always realized I back in. I don't know, because with Costco, it's kind of hard to get out if you don't back in, like if you're trying to back out. So anyway, as I'm backing in, I see this lady walking with her cart. She's got some big water cases of water on the bottom. She's got some bigger items in the top of the car. And I looked at it, no one was with her. And I thought, she might need some help. Thought to myself. So we get out of the car, get situated, and we start walking. And I looked at her, I said, do you want some help? She said, you would help me? And she was like kind of surprised I would help her. So I help her, and my kids both like, we knew you would. And you know what? And I was like, good. I'm grateful that my kids knew that I would help somebody out, that I would consider others. And so for me, modeling that means so much to me that I hope my kids adopt that. And even watching my 7-year-old son, who's trying to help get the big water case out to help this lady he doesn't know, I want them to do that. So I think, again, I'm imperfect, but yet I want to be a role model for my kids and those around me. And I think that's really a great way to connect with students, being genuinely who you are, but being a role model.
In that 30 seconds that you helped that lady, how impactful is that for her too?
Yeah, she was shocked. I mean, and I do it often. Like, we've been at Costco. I can think of 3 times specifically we've done that for people. And my kids are there with me the whole time. And, I just want them to see that I'm just not talking about considering others when they're having an argument about who gets the last piece of toast or who gets the biggest pancake. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of modeling. Like, we underestimate that they do see it.
Yeah, actually, through my master's program, the number one strategy that's proven is modeling. Whatever your desired outcome, you have to be able to do it. There's these things called mirror neurons, so students can feel innately how we are acting. And say, class meetings, I don't buy into those. I'm just up there pretending. They understand that. They feel that. But if I'm up there sharing myself, being vulnerable, engaging, I'm teaching all of them that it's okay. And hopefully, they all look up to me. That's the goal, as the authoritative figure, they all look up to me. So here I am as this model figure that they're looking to, that they are understanding it's okay to be vulnerable. It's understanding to be imperfect and all of those things. There's a second grader that used to come to me for in-house suspension. So I only had him for a couple of times, and he was disciplinary, like I think 3 times this year. Well, towards the end of the year, my principal came up and was like, hey, this little boy came to me and he said, oh, thanks for putting me in Mr. Davis's class. I'm in there with my best friend.
So wait. Thank you for putting me in school suspension because of the person in there I really like.
Yep. And so the principal was like, oh, which student is it? She goes, and the student goes, no, it's Mr. Davis. And so here, this kid that comes to my class, he was still sat in the back, did his work. But what I did is I included him in my culture. So for class meetings, he had to sit there. He listened to how I talked to my students. He listened about hope and some other, elements of my classroom. And then 3 times then he walks away and we're best friends.
To me, this conversation of modeling can turn some people off. Some teachers be like, well, that's not, I'm not there for that reason. And I think to some of those teachers, I would say it with kindness, but maybe you need a different career. I mean, how do you say that? I mean, I know there's a shortage of teachers now, right? But this will shape you to be a different person. I'm getting older, and people think I'm much younger than I am. And I always say this: kids either keep you young or make you old real fast, right? And I think they've kept me young because they've helped me to grow to be who I want to be. They helped me live up to some of my aspirational goals and things in my life because you can't fake around kids. I think that's another point. And it's kind of modeling, but it's also another point itself. Genuineness, being authentically who you are and being willing to grow and change is huge when it comes to modeling or connecting with students. They connect with people who are real. They do not like phony. And they can sense it. Like you said, the mirror neurons and all the scientific stuff, I think it's true. They look at you and go, oh, that ain't real.
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell. And so I think for many of us, going down this approach will help us become better people in the meantime, knowing that we're not perfect, but I'm growing and changing, and I'm willing to do that in the space of being vulnerable with these kids that I care about and I want to educate.
Man, that's a tough conversation. Especially me being a younger teacher, talking to teachers about these core, changes, these core value changes, change who you are, talk about who you are. But if you can conquer that and you can overcome that adversity and say, yeah, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to connect with my students on this level, that's the chance for impact. If you're really, I've only had this conversation maybe once or twice with teachers, but I asked them why they got into teaching. I don't know about, all the teachers out there, but my response is to make better people. And if that includes academics, well, science proves that you got to connect socially, emotionally to teach them better academics. So even if your goal is to make them smarter and, achieve those academics, well, you got to treat them as people first. You got to be vulnerable first. So my philosophy is, connect with students through modeling, and you can pretty much teach them anything.
This idea of being like you're growing too, right? And modeling that growth in front of your kids. I would love to hear from any teachers out there, aides as well, anyone in education who have sensed that growth in yourself as you became more vulnerable or realizing that you're a role model for these kids. Like understanding that, has that caused you to change or grow even through tough stuff where, for an example, I don't swear. I don't use cuss words. I'm not judging anyone who does. It's just me, because I want to be the same person everywhere I am. I don't want to because I've seen teachers struggle. They want to drop some bombs in the classroom, but they can't. But then they get out, they just and I don't know if they save them up all day long. At the end of the day, they're just dropping them. I go into teacher meetings after school. It's where am I at? What just happened? And I think for me, helping me to grow and understand that I need to be the same person everywhere I am, because I want to be genuinely me. Now, of course, I'll have some different conversations with adults I won't have with students, but it's who I am as a core. That's who I am, and that's who I'm becoming. Not that I'm perfect by any means, but I think I would love to hear other stories like that of people who said, you know what, being in education, understanding I'm a role model has helped me to grow in my personal life. Because honestly, for what's our program, the Choose Well program, when we do professional development, we want to help teachers grow. It's not always about, hey, go teacher, go do this, connecting with students. Yeah, we talk about this stuff too. But one of my favorite quotes, and maybe we'll do a podcast on this later, is if my output exceeds my input, my upkeep will be my downfall. The idea, you got to feed yourself. Are you first living from the inside out? And so I want that for teachers. I want them to not just get all the X and O's, but about who you are. Because if we're talking SEL and we're talking about social emotional learning, guess what? It's for teachers too.
100%. In the SEL plan that I've created, self-care is one of the topics. And I don't know if you've heard this idea for teachers, but we're creating lifelong learners. That's one of the goals for teachers, Why does that stop for us?
Yeah, we're lifelong learners. We're still living, right? So we should be learning.
And so that's something where it comes to these challenges with teachers that don't want to adopt these SEL. Well, you're supposed to be a lifelong learner. You haven't learned everything. And
I do give them a break because it's always something new. But like our friend Mike Freeman said, SEL is the plate. Everything else goes on the plate. If students sense you don't care about them, how eager are they to learn?
How eager are they to do anything?
Exactly.
I've said this to my students before. You could be the smartest person in the world, but if you're unkind, who's going to hang out with you?
It's about connecting with people. So I hope those tips are helpful for you guys watching this video. Again, not just teachers, educators, the bus driver, the aide, all of you. I think there's ways we connect with our students. One, through class meetings. I don't know if you can have a class meeting on the bus. That would be fun. Also, modeling. We talked about authenticity. I think it's important to learn how to connect with students so you can help educate them. But even outside education, it's just something about connecting with people that makes our world a little bit better. And like we always say, it's a choice. And when you make better choices, you will live a better life. So choose well.
Oh, yeah.
I got to get you put in the soundboard so you can say, oh, yeah, in the soundboard for me like my kids do. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Choose Well program. Visit our website, thechoosewellprogram.com. Subscribe, share if you watch on YouTube. And if you're listening to it, hey, share it with another teacher, share with another educator, share with a parent. When we talk about school culture, the culture is comprised of the educators, the students, and the parents. And if we're all on the same page, we can have better cultures. And through that, we can live better lives. See you next time.